The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall were treated to a gala cultural performance in Havana tonight. The couple were at the exquisite Gran Teatro Alicia Alonso for the special evening event featuring the Cuban National Ballet, Acosta Danza, and Danza Contemporanea. On arrival, their Royal Highnesses were welcomed and introduced to key figures from the Ministry of Culture, the theater and the dance companies. Camilla was elegant in a blue Anna Valentine dress and cream cords. She and her husband then took their seats for the hour-long show. The Gran Theater is an iconic building in Cuba, opening its doors in 1838 under the name of Teatro Tacon. The facade reflects four sculptural groups designed by Giuseppe Moretti in white marble representing allegories of beneficence, education, music and theater. A complete restoration was completed in early 2016 and the theater was renamed El Gran Teatro Alicia Alonso. Alicia Alonso was the founder and la prima ballerina assoluto of Cuba, of a ballet company, which later became the National Ballet of Cuba. Danza Contemporanea de Cuba, DCC, is the oldest contemporary dance company in Cuba, founded in 1959. And is currently celebrating its 60th anniversary. Earlier on Tuesday the pair were pictured as they arrived at a British classic car event in Havana. With their heir to the throne behind the wheel in borrowed black MGTD, and his wife at his side, they made a stylish entrance as they pulled up outside the Cuban capital's famous John Lennon Park. Charles had apparently grabbed the chance to test drive the vintage 1953 vehicle that mysteriously found its way to Havana the previous day. He told onlookers, "The one I was driving is the most beautiful car. It has an incredibly powerful accelerator. It is incredibly close to the brakes, so you have to be careful you don't press the wrong one." His wife, elegant in a mint green Anna Valentine dress and parasol, needed a little help to get out of the low-slung car. She joked, "You try getting out of that elegantly." Turning to look at the range of cars on show, she laughed and said, "I remember most of these cars. Shows how old I am." The car had been lent to the royal couple by Eduardo Bermudez, 47, a local restaurant owner and band manager, who spotted it 8 years ago rusting in a garage and persuaded the owner to sell it. He spent 2 years doing it up and says it is the pride and joy of his collection. "It's just like my baby," he said. He was crazy to sell it. "Crazy like me?" Asked whether he drives it himself, he exclaimed, "No, never." "Well, maybe once a month." "Everyone knows my car. It is the best British car in Cuba." But did he have any reservations about allowing the heir to the throne to get behind the wheel? "No. Of course I trust him. I know it is in safe hands." He smiled. "I am so excited. Actually, everyone in Cuba has American cars, but for me the British ones are unique, different. The best sports cars come from England in the 1950s. The ambassador rang me a week ago and asked me if the prince could borrow it and I said yes, of course. He took it for a practice yesterday, I was told. Cuba is well known for its classic cars which are still in use today due to the draconian communist regime. While most are American classics, there are some British cars and motorbikes from the 1950s on the road and their owners regularly get together. The couple were greeted by Nelly de Lupe Fuentes Macias, a representative of British car enthusiasts, before walking up and down, viewing the vehicles on show. The prince, who has a classic Aston Martin himself, was clearly in his element, lagging behind his wife and chatting enthusiastically with the owners standing by their vehicles, which included everything from Jaguars to Morris Minors. "He's never going to leave. He loves his cars," Camilla remarked, smiling. "He's really rather in his element." They also met Lázaro William González Ruiz, head of the British classic motorbike enthusiasts, who was wearing a bandana and sporting leathers and metal jewelry. Charles and Camilla seemed rather tickled by his appearance and chatted at length to him, through an interpreter, about his passion before looking at the bikes on show, including a 1956 Norton. "Now motorbikes, that's something else he loves," said the Duchess. Afterward they were introduced to musicians from Submarino Amarillo, Yellow Submarine, Bar Envedado, who had been serenading them with a variety of Beatles classics. The legendary Liverpudlian band is hugely popular in Cuba as during the 50s and 60s, The ruling Communist Party banned citizens from listening to American music due to the aggression between the two nations. Many turned to British music instead, particularly the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. They then walked along into the park's John Lennon Square, where they sat on a bench which has a statue of the distinctive Beatles singer sculpted by Cuban artist, José Villas-Oberón, sitting on it, alongside a marble plaque inscribed with lyrics from John Lennon's song, Imagine. Before leaving the park they chatted with members of the local British community in Havana, organized by the British Embassy. The Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall met one of the legends of Cuban music today at a recording studio in Havana. Iliades Ochoa, who played in the original lineup of the Buena Vista Social Club, told them about the history of the band, and told the couple that their visit might even inspire a new version of band, many of whose original members have died since their album became a worldwide success in 1996. They met Ochoa at the Egram State Recording Studio, which is the heart of Cuban music recording. Most of Cuba's major stars have recorded there, including members of Buena Vista Social Club, the band that was brought together to revive the music of pre-revolutionary Cuba and was the subject of an award-winning documentary by Wim Wenders. The couple were told how the studio opened in 1944, and after the revolution came under the control of the state record label Egram. International stars as well as Cubans have recorded there, including Nat King Cole, who recorded his first Spanish-language album there. Ochoa, one of the band's guitarists, told them how the original lineup of Buena Vista Social Club was meant to include a number of African musicians. They told us that the Africans were going to come tomorrow, and then the next day, and then later. Finally, he said, they never came, and the band recruited Cuban musicians who would go on to become world famous, among them Compay Segundo, Ibrahim Ferrer, and Ruben Gonzalez. He told Charles and Camilla, now with your visit we are given the strength to form another Buena Vista Social Club. We are grateful that you are here. They then listened to a performance by a quartet of younger jazz musicians led by saxophone player Michelle Herrera, who afterwards met the Duchess and greeted her with a kiss. Amanda Fenton, who runs a B&B and has lived in Havana for 5 years, said, she said it was an interesting place, very nice, but a bit hot on occasions. The couple will later meet members of the Buena Vista Social Club at a Havana recording studio. The group became worldwide celebrities when their 1997 album became a surprise global hit and Grammy Award winner. Yesterday, the Prince of Wales was formally welcomed to Cuba by its president as the royal visit was hailed as a boost to Britain's post-Brexit ambitions. President Miguel Díaz-Canel and his wife Lise Cuesta greeted Charles and Camilla on Monday evening at the end of their first full day in the communist country. In a ceremony at Havana's Palace of the Revolution, the prince inspected a guard of honor before introducing Mr. Díaz-Canel to his entourage of aides, including his wife. The Duchess and the President had met earlier in the palace where they shook hands and chatted before the formal ceremony began, followed by talks between the Cuban leader and the heir to the throne and dinner. Earlier that day Carlos Acosta, who is artistic director of Birmingham Royal Ballet, said that as the communist country of his birth continued to open up culturally and economically, it was time for the UK to also build bridges as it left the EU. And Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt described the visit as a great example of bold and pragmatic UK diplomacy in a tweet. Acosta met the prince and his wife after they began their historic trip to Cuba by touring the old quarter of Havana, where they were mobbed by press and the public in chaotic scenes. Charles played the tourist when they stopped to listen to a traditional band and dropped a coin in their collection hat, while Camilla's visit to the capital was sealed with a kiss, a peck on the hand from a street performer. The ballet star welcomed Charles and Camilla to his dance company, which is helping disadvantaged young people from across the region fulfill their potential. Speaking about the visit, a first by members of the royal family, the dancer said, I think it's a big deal, especially with all the Brexit. The UK is looking for emerging markets and different partnerships and to sort of build bridges with other nations, and Cuba is doing the same, which is really great. Acosta was principal guest dancer for 17 years with the Royal Ballet and performed many times in front of the prince. He added, from the Cuban perspective it is a time for building bridges, to reach out to the world, and I think also for the UK they are doing the same with this inevitable Brexit going forward. so I think it's just the perfect fit. Charles's visit offers an opportunity for the UK and Cuban governments to forge closer ties in the wake of the soft diplomacy employed by members of the royal family, who use it to make friends and build bridges during foreign tours. Amnesty International UK Director Kate Allen said, "While Charles and Camilla aren't formal representatives of the government, they obviously have influence, and if they can use their visit to Havana as an opportunity to raise human rights issues, that would be most welcome." Anthony Stokes, Britain's ambassador to Cuba, said the recent widening of internet availability by the Cuban government allowed the views of ordinary people to be heard. He added, "That gives us an opportunity to talk about freedom of expression. By engaging at a high level, we can have an interchange about how we see the advantages of freedom of expression, and what the government might do here to improve its human rights record." The Duchess of Cornwall was told Britain has some catching up to do when it comes to women's equality during a visit to members of the Federation of Cuban Women in Havana, where she was told women enjoy equal pay to men in the socialist state. The round-table discussion also championed the fact that despite being ruled by Fidel Castro and his brother Raúl for 57 years, the Cuban parliament now boasts the second highest number of women of any parliament in the world. The Federation, which has 4.3 million members making up 91.7% of the female population of the communist state, helps women aged 14 and above to find work, access healthcare, and gain support if they find themselves in vulnerable situations. Camilla has made gender equality and issues such as domestic violence the cornerstone of her public work. The Federation's prevention officer Mayra Diaz Garcia said, "In Cuba, women have the same rights as men. We are so glad the Duchess has come to see all we have achieved here, and we hope that can be replicated by women who live in difficult conditions around the world." More than 64% of Cuban women work in a profession, 48% work for the state, while 34% are employed by the private sector. Cuba has the second highest number of women in parliament of any other country in the world. Two of the top three positions in government are occupied by women, including the vice presidency.